recording.
Good morning, everyone. I know that everyone knows who I am. I bet that some of you are wondering why I am dressed the way that I am. Well, I will get to that a little later in my presentation. Today I hope that I will inspire you and give you more understanding regarding people with special needs, and maybe more. Today I am going to speak about my life on these three topics. First, my upbringing, the first years of my life. Moving away from my parents and family. Second, advocating for myself and for people with disabilities. Being a part of advocating to get supportive living services here in Kern County. Raising a family and being married, then being a single dad. Previous employment, the big documentary. The trip and breaking records. Then the last one is understanding and presenting myself as Nicole. The struggles associated with my new life changes. Living as a transgender woman. New employment as a woman, as a public speaker. Finding happiness within myself as NickoleRenee. As you can see, we have a lot to cover in the next 45 minutes. So let's get started, shall we? I was born in Topeka, Kansas in 1960. Yes, I know that it is hard to believe because I don't look over 29 right. Anyway, my mom was having difficulties giving birth to me. The doctor gave her something to help her relax, which made me relax to the point where I wasn't breathing. When I came out of my mom, the doctor would not help me, so my dad gave me CPR for 5 minutes before I started to breathe on my own. When I was 2, the doctor told my parents that I probably had some brain damage and that I would probably be a vegetable and be a burden on the family. Now, I want to know what type of vegetable he thought that I would be. He also told them to put me away in a board and care home. My parents said no, and that they were going to raise me as normal as they could. As I was growing up my first years of school, I was put in a special education classes, but my dad wanted them to mainstream me into regular classes. Now back then in the Midwest it was not even thought of, but he wanted me to get a good education. In 1968 my dad got transferred to Edwards Air Force Base. This is where things really happened for me. My dad tried to get the base to let me go to school on the base. They told my dad that the school wasn't set up for disabled students. So I had to go to school in California City. Man, did I change that school. By the 5th grade, not only the disabled students knew me, but the whole school knew me. They had a fence to divide the special ed students from the regular students. I said, heck no, and I went to the other side. Hey, I thought that I was not any different from the other students. The yard crew got tired of me going over to the other side and then bringing me back, that they let me stay. By the end of the year, ultimately, the fence was removed. My high school years, wow. By the time of my 8th grade, I was typing on an electric typewriter. They tried to get me to use a head pointer, you know, with the one that came from the hat and it is right in the middle of your eyes. Have you tried this? Whoever thought of this idea must have been very cross-eyed, because by the time I had it on for 20 minutes I was seeing double of everything. Then they came up with the idea of the mouth stick. Good idea, right? Wrong, not with someone who has cerebral palsy and drools a lot. I had drool all over the keyboard. I mean, it looked like a St. Bernard was typing. It was everywhere. Then one day I had my own idea. I thought, well, I have this big pointer in front of my face called a nose, so why don't I use it? I did, and it worked for me, and I used it until I was 14. Now I use a piece of assistive technology called an head mouse. Some of you can see the shiny grey dot on my forehead. That's my mouse. My senior year of high school was the easiest year, but in the middle of the year I got called into my counselor's office. He told me that I couldn't graduate with my class because I didn't any PE credits. In order for me to receive my high school diploma, I needed those credits. When I got home from school that day, I told my parents what my counselor told me. My mother was thinking about going back to England to visit her family, and my parents thought that since I wasn't going to graduate, that it would be a good time for my mom to go and visit her family in England. Well, the word got out. The senior class, and they started a petition that said that if I didn't walk with them, that there wasn't going to be a graduation, and about everyone signed it. When I found out that they were going to let me walk across the stage, my mom had already left for England. She wasn't happy that she wouldn't be at the graduation to see me get my diploma. I found out that what I received was an honorary diploma, and I had to go to another school in order to receive my real diploma. That graduation night was the best night of my life. I got a standing ovation from everyone that night because I was the first disabled student that graduated from Madeira High School. When I was 20 years old, I wanted to move out of my parents', but my mom thought that I wouldn't be able to live on my own. My dad, with the help of Regional Centre, found a facility that was run by the United Cerebral Palsy and Love for the Disabled, as well as a high school where I could go and get my PE requirements. My mom did not want me to leave, but she knew I had to go. When I arrived, I felt so out of place because I really did not grow up around anyone else who was disabled. I was raised to be independent, and I felt that my independence was taken away because I could not go out by myself when I wanted to. It was that way for 2 months. After 2 months, I was allowed to go out on my own. I would play sick a lot because I did not want to go back to school. Sooner or later, I knew they would figure out what I was doing. This is where I began to be a troublemaker. I would take off late at night with friends and come back drunk. This is funny, but it wasn't funny at the time. I met my first wife, Teresa, in the same facility, and we dated for about 4 years before we got married. Within the 5 months that I was living in the facility, they thought that it would be better if I lived in the community with 4 other clients. This is how I got my independence. While I was dating Teresa, I would go to the facility to visit her since she was living there. I also had a good friend named Debbie that was living there also that was in a car accident. I would go and visit them both at the facility. One day Debbie and I decided to go visit her mom in North Hollywood. Keep in mind that the facility was in Silmer, roughly about an hour away in our wheelchairs. Debbie had a trach and she needed to be shunt off every couple hours. I wrote a note and gave it to a nurse. It said where we were going. I also gave instructions to the nurse to wait an hour before she handed the note to the intended person. When we arrived at her mom's house, all hell broke loose. Her mom got a phone call from the facility and they wanted to come to her mom's and pick her up. Her mom told them no, to wait a while, that she would call when we were ready to go back. Her mom also mentioned that what I did was the best thing that could have happened to Debbie. A week later, after returning to the facility, she was allowed to go out on her own. Moving on to Teresa, like I said, we dated for about 4 years before we got married. Before we got married, her mother took me into her room and told me that I would be making a big mistake if I married her daughter. I would soon find out what exactly those words meant. I unfortunately found out that Teresa had anger issues. That anger was now turned on me. Soon it escalated into an abusive, emotional and physical relationship, and I was on the receiving end of it. This abuse went on for approximately 4 years. After I left Teresa, I got into drugs and alcohol mainly to hide the pain and the feeling that I failed in my marriage, some other feelings that I didn't know how to deal with, so I got in with the wrong crowd. I wasn't happy with myself, but I knew what would make me happy, and I will explain that in a few minutes. For 8 years I dated women, but I never allowed them to get close. I would push them away because I didn't want to get hurt until I met my second wife, Tracy. I knew that we were going to be together from the day we met. We met one day at a summer camp and she wouldn't talk to me. Well, 2 years later we met again at Bakersfield College and we started talking. Well, 3 months later I moved in with Tracy. When we met there wasn't any supported living, and before I had moved in with Tracy she had a roommate that was getting paid for helping her, but Tracy's roommate was never around. When I came around all I had was IHSS hours, and Tracy did too, but we needed more support than all IHSS could give us. This is the beginning of the supportive living service movement, as I call it. Thanks to Dr. Clark, G. Lloyd and Lloyd's Liberty Home and the compassion of Karen Johnson for people with developmental disabilities, the SLS was born, and I am happy to be a part of this well-needed service in Kern County. Moving on, after Tracy and I had dated for about 3 months, we got into a bad argument. I was still drinking and doing drugs heavily. I started to throw stuff at her and she told me that if I didn't straighten up my life and get rid of everything bad that I was doing, that she wouldn't come back. She rolled out the door. At this point I knew that I really messed up and I was angry at myself. So I thought that I would try to kill myself. I went to the bathroom and I tried to open some pill bottles and I couldn't open any. Now that made me even madder, so at the time we lived out on Gosford Road in Ming. I thought that if I couldn't overdose on pills, I would try to get run over. I went out and every light that I came to turned red for the oncoming traffic. After an hour of unsuccessfully trying, I gave up and went back home. When I got home I was crying so hard I really wanted to give up. Now I have always known of God and I have seen a lot of miracles in my life, but I never gave him my life. There's a God and I know it. That night I got on my knees crying and I asked God to take away all of the bad stuff that was in my life and bring back all of the good that he wanted me to have in my life. The very next morning, I got all of my drugs and alcohol and I flushed them down the toilet. I never experienced any withdrawals ever after that night, especially because I was so dependent on alcohol. A couple of days later, Tracy came back. 3 months later we were married. Right after we got married we found out that we were expecting. The doctor that we had never seen or experienced anyone else who had cerebral palsy who was pregnant. He didn't know if he wanted to take on our case. When we went into the room with him, he asked Tracy who got her pregnant and she told him that I was the father. He looked at me and asked me how in the hell did I get her pregnant. I responded, "You are the doctor and you don't know." Soon after he asked Tracy if she wanted to terminate the pregnancy. We both said, "Hell no." A week later we found out that the doctor would take on our case. By the end of the pregnancy the doctor was treating us like any other couple. Tracy carried our son full term. Of course many tests were done to see if he would have any kind of disabilities. He was born healthy and without any complications. The moment we was out of the room, the nurse handed him right to my arms. My son looked at me as if he was saying, "I'm here, Dad." Before he was born, CPS found out that we were expecting, and they said that if we didn't have the support that was needed to take care of him, that they would take him away from us. Kern Regional helped us find the support that was needed to take care of him. We had help for the first 3 years of his life. People were so amazed when they saw Tracy and me out with Zach. Some people would ask us whose kid was he, and when we said that he was ours, they could not believe it. Sometimes when I would take Zach to daycare, I would get asked by someone from the Californian if they could take pictures of us. Sometimes I felt that Bakersfield had their eyes on us. As years went by, Tracy and I grew apart because we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things regarding raising our son, among other stuff. So after 14 years of marriage, we decided to get a divorce. Since Zach was close to me, we decided that he would live with me. Now working and being a whole family was one thing, but being a single parent was a big challenge, and people that know me know that I like a challenge. I passed with flying colors. Now let me talk to you about my employment. Now, I've worked from the age of 17 years old, and I've had many different jobs. My very first job was a secretary for the American Cancer Society. I have done it all, from laying about any type of flooring to computer programming and repair. You name it and probably did it. In 2000, I found my job that I love. It was in assistive technology. When I started in this field, the assistive technology movement was beginning, and I was one of the first assistive technology advocates in the state of California. I applied for a job at our local independent living center, and they had an opening for an assistive technology advocate. Now I didn't know what it was, and I was just happy to begin working again after 4 years of not working. When I found out what it was, I really enjoyed, because I love technology and I like helping people. While I was at the Independent Living Center, my partner and I began to help this center called the Kern Assistive Technology Center. It was small, and we helped with the center for about 3 years. In 2003, the board of the Kern Assistive Technology Center and the Kern High School District were talking about making Kern Assistive Technology Center its own non-profit. In the fall of 2003, thanks to Dr. Clark and Darren Markowitz and the board of the Kern Assistive Technology Center, it became its own non-profit in the fall of 2003, and in March of 2004 I was hired by the Kern Assistive Technology Center. Over the last 10 years that I worked there, I've watched it grow and help many people get the right assistive technology that they needed to help them be more independent by reading, writing, and to communicate. Now I know that you all heard what my son and I did back in 2012. The quest to Sacramento was a major achievement in my life and a turning point for me. I wanted to do something to bring awareness to the budget and raise awareness to the developmentally disabled community, as well as to raise money for the new building of Kern Assistive Technology Center. I also wanted to break the record for the most miles traveled in a 24 hours period, and I did it. I rode 170 miles in 22 hours and 44 minutes. I am in the Guinness World Records book. Now to the part that you are probably wondering about. Understanding and presenting myself as NickoleRenee Mensch and living as a transgender woman. Well, let me go back to my younger days. Back when I was 11 or 12, is remembered, I felt that I was different from my brother, and I would like to play with my sister's dolls and hang out with them. I remember watching a TV program that had the very first male to female transgender person. They spoke about how they felt like they were in the wrong body. I thought to myself, that is how I feel, but I couldn't tell anybody because I thought that it was wrong. All through my high school years I would hang out with all my female friends, and I hardly had any male friends because I didn't feel like I had anything in common with them. A lot of people in high school thought that I was gay. When I finally moved out of my parents' house and moved to the facility, and now there were a lot of transgender people that worked there, I had a chance to come out, but I thought it was wrong, and I thought that my family would disown me. So I put the thought in the back of my head, and I thought that I would be what society wanted me to be. When I got married to Teresa, the thought came back. I bought a couple of things and I hid them away. I could not wait until she left so I could be Nicole. When Teresa and I got a divorce and I got my own apartment, I would shut all the blinds and be myself behind closed doors. That went on for 8 years. Before Tracy and I got married, I told her about myself, but I never did it in front of her, and I kind of put Nicole in the back of my head again. When Tracy and I got a divorce, that was a hard time for me because I knew who I wanted to be, but I had my son to think about. I began to have a hard time coping with myself because I knew who I really was and I really wanted to come out, but I also knew that I needed help. I started to see a counselor and I finally started to let feelings out. I had always talked about Nicole to my counselor, and after a year she wanted to meet Nicole. That day I was so scared to go out in public as Nicole. I went down every alley that I could find so no one could see me. My heart was in my throat when I got to my counselor. She was amazed how well and happy I looked. Since that day, that's when I started to become myself. About 2 years ago, I finally decided to come out to people, and I have been going to a psychiatrist that deals with gender identity disorders. I have been happier with myself since I became who I am full-time. I recently started changing myself into a female by taking hormone therapy. I plan to have the surgery in about a year. I've had a lot of support from friends that I never thought I would have. Coming out to my friends was the hardest thing for me to do, but the hardest thing for me to do was to tell my mother. She's still having a hard time with it, but I know she loves me a lot, and that's all that matters to me. My sisters are okay with it, but my brother thinks that it's only a phase that I'm going through. My thoughts about that is I would not be going through all the pain and mood swings if it were only a phase. I told my son about 4 years ago about Nicole. In the beginning it was very difficult for him. We went through a lot of trials, but we worked them out. Now he's a lot better, but still gives me a hard time about my decisions, but sees how much happier I am when I don't have a moment with my mood swings. As you can guess, I am changing my profession from an assistive technology tech to a public speaker. I really think that I have a lot to offer people from everything that I have gone through in my life. I had a good friend, and some of you may know him because he taught health ed at Bakersfield College. Norm Hoffman used to have me come and speak at all of his classes. And you don't know how many people would come up to me and thank me for helping them with depression or understanding people with disabilities. I have so many stories, but this one is my favorite. After my speech one day, a lady came up to me and she was apologizing to me, and I asked, "Why are you apologizing to me?" And she told me that she had a daughter who was in a class with another kid who was disabled, and the mom did not want her in the classroom with a disabled person. She had them take her out of that class because she felt uncomfortable. After hearing my speech, she felt that she did the wrong thing by pulling her out, and she was going to have the school put her back in class with the disabled student. She thanked for coming, and it really changed her outlook about people with disabilities. Another experience that I would know is when we went to speak with troubled teens at Foothill High School. 3 days before we were supposed to go, the principal called Norm and asked if I was sure that I wanted to do this. He thought that the kids eat me alive. Those kids was the most well-behaved kids, and most of the kids changed their life around. Now, as I mentioned before, I'd felt different from my male friends, well, the ones I did have. When I finally came out, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt like I was reborn again. It is like waking up on Christmas Day and you opened up that present that you have been waiting for all year for, and it was here and you couldn't wait to use it. Well, that is kind of how I feel. Being myself and to be honest with myself and others is an awesome feeling. I am really happy of the person that I am, and I want to show everyone that I am just like any other person. I hope that I have enlightened you about people with disabilities and transgender people. Be true to yourself and be happy. Thank you.
Good job. Good job.
One of them was Kevin.